back with Fathers for Fathers with my sidekick and really the smarter guy in the room is Jeff Watson. So glad he's here, and I don't mind admitting I'm a little bit more stoked than usual about the guest we have today. And if his background is any indication of what we're in for, I think it's going to be a real treat. So, Jeff, do you want to introduce our guest
I'd
today?
love to. I would love to. Today, it's such a pleasure to be interviewing Randall Wallace. Randall Wallace, man, I've read lots about you, and you're going to hear a little bit more in a second. You guys are in for a big treat. Randall and his son Andrew run a production company together, a real father and son duo, which is right up our alley here at Fathers for Fathers. But just to get you all acquainted to who Randall is, he's a writer, he's a novelist, a producer, a director, a composer, a true Renaissance man. Here we have with us today. He's best known for writing the blockbuster films Braveheart. Probably heard of that one.
Wow.
Braveheart,
Yeah.
come on, Braveheart, Secretariat, Pearl Harbor, Heaven is for Real, and there's so many others. Man, thank you so much for being with us today, Randall.
Yeah. Welcome, Randall.
I'm thrilled to be with you guys, and there's nothing in the world more important than being a father, and nothing more fulfilling or challenging and meaningful. Now I'm the father of three sons, and all of them are involved with me and with each other, and there's nothing that gives me more joy and more challenge, and nothing I pray about more, and nothing that has mattered to me more in who I have been and am becoming than being a father. So, so thrilled to be with you guys here about this.
We are in good company. That's amazing. And hey, we want to talk about a bunch of different things. We want to talk about, you've got a one-man show coming up that we really want to talk about. I've heard a little bit about that, but we also want to, we've got a special interest in Braveheart. I mean, we're both Braveheart fans, and I think there's so much that it's encapsulated in that movie around, what it means to be confident, to be brave, to have grit, to have convictions, and I think those attributes are also important, as we navigate these times we're living in today, right? So I'll start out with the first question, Randall. Randall, Fathers for Fathers exist because we are interested in being fishers of men. We're looking to encourage men to be the best versions of themselves so they can be all they can be for their families. Man, Braveheart was such a guttural kind of movie for me, I know, and it was for so many. Just it was a movie about standing up for what you believe in. It was a movie about responsibility. It was about grit. Battle happening on the field, but it's also about a battle happening inside. It's like the human spirit, right? So let me start off. So when trying times happen, Randall, as they often do, sometimes it's hard to believe that things will ever get any better. What is a good starting point to consider when someone is in a desperate need for change? As thinking about the writing you've done and thinking about, the backdrops of your different movies, and what would you say?
Well, so it's a fascinating thing. I hadn't really reflected on this in a long while until we started this, and when my son said, "Okay, Fathers for Fathers," and I went, "Oh, incredible, awesome, count me in." I didn't realize there were 4 father and son relationships in Braveheart until someone pointed that out to me. I hadn't written it with that consciousness in mind, but any story about who you are and what happens when you're lost, there's actually 5 relationships, because it's not only William Wallace with his father and Edward I with his son, and Hamish and Stephen, and the father, and Robert the Bruce and his, but it's William Wallace with God the Father, and that becomes the relationship that defines every other relationship in his life, and I think that gets at the answer to your question, Jeff, or one of the ways of answering the question is that when we're lost, we're not lost to God. We are lost. God's not lost.
Wow.
And I've had that experience recently. I pray formally pray morning and evening. I grew up Baptist, so I pray all the time. I don't take a sip of water without thanking God
You're
for
the
it.
Apostle Paul.
And it's just, that,
Yeah.
by the way, does not mean I live an exemplary life. It just means,
Yeah.
no, I need to be better.
Yeah.
But I was praying in the evening before going to bed, and I have a stained glass window that I had made right after my father passed away. It has the Celtic cross on it that is over my father and now mother's graves. And it also has a symbol from the Wallace family crest that pertains to a story that I'll share with you now or later. But I was there, and I had this thought that when God closes a door, it's because he's got something better. And that sounds like such just sort of spiritual saccharin. So easy to say, but you either believe that or you don't. Now, it's easy to say when you're high and dry and warm and well fed. It's harder to when you feel the earth moving under your feet. But that is what I found is required. And the you guys mentioned just before we started about following the flag. And it's fascinating to me that you use that example, because what Braveheart really came from was a moment in which my whole life was upside down. I was facing catastrophe in pretty much every direction. And I was so overwrought that I couldn't write, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't eat. And I had at that point 2 sons. My third son hadn't been born yet. And when I was about the same age as my sons were at that point, I had seen my father lose his job and have a complete collapse. And it was terrifying, and more than terrifying. And I didn't know where to go. I had only one place to go. I got down on my knees and I prayed. And my prayer was, if I go down in this fight, maybe what I want to be able to keep my family in this nice home in a nice neighborhood and all that, though I had grown up in a house with no indoor plumbing at one point in my life. And maybe my sons will become better men if they have to have that experience too. And if that's what God wants, then help me be a true man, a true father, and bear it and bring that on. But if I go down in this fight, let me go down not on my knees worshiping Hollywood, but standing up with my flag flying, fighting for what I believe. Let me go down that way. And without that moment, I would have never written, they may take our lives, they'll never take our freedom. I would have never written any of the things that are in Break. I would have never written every man dies, not every man really lives.
Yeah.
I had to be there to find that story. I didn't make that story up. God gave that story to me. And I just got to be the first audience of the tale. So I try to tell my own sons, if I had my way, I would remove from you everything that'll make you a man. Every heartbreak, every pain, every time you feel like you failed. But failure is not feeling like you failed. Failure is not building the airplane and having it crash. Failure is not building the airplane. Failure is not having the courage to step out into the unknown. That's failure. That's the failure we will not have.
I love that. That is a lot to unpack. I was sitting listening to you, and I was thinking about my own life right now, Randall. And I mean, Jeff knows this, but boy, I'll tell you, I am stretched beyond compare. And you actually just spoke prophetically into my own life, because I don't mind admitting I went through a very difficult time after my dad died. I was sharing that with you offline. And I was couch surfing, and like you, it sounds like we have a similar backstory. And I don't mind admitting one of my biggest fears is I don't want to ever go back there, and I definitely don't want my family to end up there. And so there's this drive in me, um, from a place of fear, which I know the enemy wants to prey on. Right? God's not with you. If this is going bad, it must be because he's abandoned you, or you've done something wrong, or you didn't hear him right and you've charged
Yeah.
off in the wrong direction. Whatever it is, it's a lie. And I love that you said, even if it goes bad, and you didn't say this, but really what you're implying is Lord, may you be glorified. So even if it goes bad and everything just goes to snot, I got to trust that your word is true. And in your word, you say, I will work for good, all things for those who love me, for my glory. But our idea of that good is not necessarily to be in a house with plumbing, right? I mean,
Yeah.
we don't know how he's working. And it could be intergenerational. We might not even see it in our lifetime. How many people have gone on to be with the Lord and never seen the fruit of their hardship? It was for the next generation, right? So that was very prophetic what you said. And it's funny because I was thinking about one of my favorite lines that you wrote in that movie, and it's another father-son relationship, but it's an uncle-son relationship in that William's uncle adopted him and raised him and taught him, languages, and took him to Europe. But one of the things he said to him, and it was about restraint and perseverance and self-control. And frankly, you were sharing the fruits of the Spirit in one phrase, and it was, first you learn how to use this,
Right.
and then I'll teach you how to use this. And it was the sword. And I thought, what a metaphor, because the sword of God is his word. And then off he goes with his uncle until he returns as this, vibrant young man ready to take on ultimately what was his destiny. And so, yeah, when you talk about your hardships, like the last 3 or 4 weeks, I've literally sat with some of my leadership team, and I've said, I don't mind admitting this is the first time in a very long time in my life where I feel like I'm stretched beyond my capacity. And my chief investment officer actually said, well, that's a good thing, Jay. It means God's still working on you.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I I I never go through a day without praying for and about my sons. And of course, my main focus is how can I be the father God wants me to be for them? Um, and and I realize when we're in the thick of it, in the most challenging things, that those are gifts. That's the battle. I want my sons to be warriors, and warriors are made for the battle. That where is the battle, and how do we fight it? And of course, so much of it is within ourselves. It's been a peculiar thing, and I want to sort of give the disclaimer. Whenever I say this, I'm afraid it sounds really self-righteous. But when having grown up Baptist, I've read the Bible every day since I was 10 years old. And I've had people think that sounds like religiously fanatical or something, but I mean, well, if you
just love the word,
you wouldn't. Yeah. I mean,
yeah.
And even all the hours and hours I spent in church, and still do at times, I heard orators who could hold an audience for forever with what they were saying. I heard Bach and Beethoven and Handel, but the Bible itself is stunning. And I've read it when at the start of the pandemic, I decided to read it start to finish. I was kind of inspired by Jordan Peterson's lectures on Genesis. So I started with, and I'm now in my 4th time through. And you read about David and the fatherhood and the manhood, and not only father, like you talk about intergenerational, not just the father of Solomon, but the that Jesus is of the house and lineage of David, and all of the Jewish people, King David, and choices that he made that were stunning in things like, okay, his Absalom his sons led a rebellion against him. He's fleeing Jerusalem, and I forget the name of the guy, but a guy that had served under Saul and hated David comes out and curses David. And David says to one of his men, says, I'm going to go over and kill that guy. And David says, don't do that. Maybe he's right. If God is telling him to say these words against me, I should hear this criticism and move on and let him say it. And they go on, and then they defeat the rebel army, and they're coming back, and the guy comes running out and goes, oh, David, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. Please don't. And David's right-hand man goes, now I'm going to kill him. And David goes, no, we're not. We're not. But then when David is handing over power to Solomon, he goes, be sure you kill that guy.
Oh yeah. He literally says, don't let him go down to his grave. I know. It's so hilarious. Funny. It's one of the only places in the Bible where the word logizomai is used, which is literally like basically retribution. So yeah,
that's amazing. I love that.
I sit there and think, wow, like poor David, he was such a man after God's own heart, but in his flesh, he still had a grudge at the end, you know.
Such providence. When you look at the Bible, even just reading, I'm reading it actually again with my son. It's a cartoon Bible. It's like anime, but you see the providence. Like when you look at the story, how it's woven together, it really, you know, as a storyteller and a story writer, Randall, you probably see like, it's just like that was so intentional. God was so intentional in how this all got laid out. And, you know, one of the things that popped up in my mind that I think I'm going to take away from this for sure is when you said we might be lost, but God's not lost. And he's got the plan. And, you know, I think speaking to the men out there who are listening, Randall, so often in life, you know, especially if we're talking to men who have fallen, or, you know, you're in a broken relationship, or you're struggling with addiction, we often have to write and rewrite our stories over and over again. Yes. And often, you know, we got to sew in, if we want to get out of it, we got to sew in a silver lining of perspective, but also consider God's providence. And I think I wanted to ask you, like, as a storyteller, how important are our stories to look back and, you know, look in the rear view mirror? Like when I was reading the Bible recently with my son, I just couldn't believe how, you know, when you're in the moment, you see it as a great story, but when you look at the narrative elongated, it's just like, wow, God is writing a real story here.
You could almost stick with the narrative of David here. And by the way, it was Joab and Zariah. He said, don't let them go down to their grave. And then he said, but don't forget, and he was talking to Abner and Ner, but then he also said, don't forget these guys, make sure they always have a place at your table. So on one hand, he's like, kill those guys, show these guys generosity that's unprecedented. But sticking with the narrative of David and what Jeff's just said, I mean, the guy was a train wreck. I mean, he committed adultery, murder, he lied, he cheated, you know, so, and yet God still said, this is a man after my own heart. And he wrote some of the most beautiful, heartfelt Psalms, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the true warrior poet. And when you say about, you know, men who are experience brokenness and failure and all of those things, it's not just that I have a heart for them, it's like I am them. It's not, you know, and I know you guys feel the same way. It's not, we are not sitting here going, look, we have it all figured out, we've got all the answers. No. Lives are perfect, let us share that with you. It's like we're all wounded, blown apart on the battlefield people. And that to me is what is so divinely compelling about the story of Jesus is grace. Is God loves us when we don't deserve it. We can do our best. We're not ever going to deserve it. That's what love is. And it's such a mysterious aspect to me of, I talk about this in my show, all the things that I'm telling you I've put into this one live show I'm doing, but I was doing a charity screening of Braveheart a few years back, and and we screened the movie, and then I walked up on the stage to do a question and answer with the audience. And the first person who stood up was a 19-year-old woman who said, "I don't have a question, Mr. Wallace. I just wanted to tell you, my fiance died 6 months ago. And he told me before he died that he wanted me to watch Braveheart so I would understand the way he loved me."
Oh, wow.
I just,
That wrecks you, man.
oh, it tore my heart out. And it made me think, what does it mean to love in a Braveheart way? And I've always been attracted to the stories of a person like, say, Lancelot loves Queen Guinevere. And there's even a line in the movie Excalibur when he says to her, "I will love you as my queen. I will love you as the wife of my best friend. As long as I live, I'll serve no other." And yet in that story, they commit adultery. They get too close to the fire. They cross the line. But the notion that we would love someone in a way that was transformative for us as well as for them, that the way William Wallace loved not only made him who he was, but made his wife who she was. The last moment of Braveheart, when the axe is falling, and I can vividly see myself there writing that moment, thinking, I can't show the audience the axe striking his neck. So what do we see now? And I thought, well, let's be with him. He looks toward his friends because he knows his friends are there. But it was not until that instant when I typed, in the last moment of his life, William Wallace turns his eyes towards Hamish and Stephen. It was not until that moment typing that I knew that she was there too, saying, "I am where you're coming." And I wept. And I think that adventure, that life of discovery is what we're looking for. Where, as Jesus said, it's like life and life more abundantly. We're not wanting to put ourselves in a box so we restrict and cut off our lives and have it less. We're looking to blow open the doors, and it's something beyond the law. It's something beyond our own understanding. It's something beyond our own ability to achieve. It's a gift, and yet it's more real than real. Sorry to preach.
No, this is amazing. I'm just processing what you're saying, and I was just thinking how much our Heavenly Father loves us, and it can sound so cliche, but when you actually think about how he's demonstrated that, and when you're reading his word, and you're facing trials, it's so tempting to want to take those trials on ourselves instead of actually realizing we don't have to actually physically fight this fight. Like he's actually just literally waiting because he loves us, like that kind of love, to step in front of us and take the blows for us. And when I listen to you talk about, in the movie, his love for his wife, I mean, I think every man has it in his heart to want to love a woman like that.
Right. Yes.
It's in us. It's in us. And, we could go on so many tangents here. Like, I mean, literally pornography has destroyed men's hearts towards women and, turned relationships into, transactional relationships, but staying on this vein of godly love for a woman and God's love for us, and how he's literally demonstrating it to us for us to then copy it. Like, my wife and I were praying every morning together, and that's not something we've done. We're coming up on our 10 years married, and we've just started praying every morning together about 3 weeks ago. And ironically, it came from another interview that Jeff and I did with an amazing couple. And she said to me, I said, sweetheart, what are like some things that I do that just really demonstrates my love for you? And she said, there's two things. One, when you open the door for me, you've always done it. And I love it because you're very busy, and we can be in the airport, people, And I want to know that I'm important to you. I want to know that I'm the most important person to you. And when you put your hand on the small of my back, or you open a door for me, or just when we're out on a date and you run around and open the door to the car, it tells me you value me.
Right.
And she said, and two, I love that we're praying together. She said, I love that you lead us to our Father in humility under his authority over our marriage and pray together. And so when you talk about this love that William had, I mean, obviously it's our prayer as men, for the men listening, that they would experience this at some point in time in their life. And it's never too late. Like David made a lot of mistakes, bringing us back to that hero of the Bible. And yet God still smiled down on David and continued to use him and honor him. And, Nathan said, your house will never be free of the sword because of your sin. So, David had to live with the consequences of his sin. I think one of the things with men is, we screw up, but then we want God to clean up our mess. And then moreover, 20 years later, when we're still dealing with the mess, we're blaming God for the fact that the mess is still there. It's like, well, no, like this, if you actually trace this back, this was your rebelliousness as a man going your own way and not trusting him. So you gotta own that, but it doesn't mean he's not writing an amazing story from it if you
Yeah.
let him and get out of the way. So yeah, that's
So good.
yeah, that's so good, Randall. So good.
I don't know if you have any comments, Randall. Hey, I'm really loving. Don't call it preaching. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
This is mentoring. This is a mentoring session, brother.
This is a hold the line kind of moment here. We're encouraging men like hold the line, and if you take 1 inch forward, it's 1 inch that we're taking from the enemy, and we actually don't have to do the battle. We can do the battle on our knees, right?
Well,
yeah, go ahead, Randall.
Well, that's exactly what I'm doing in wanting to create a live event, because I know the power of being able to make a movie, and that it can go all over the world. And yes, that's a marvelous, a divine thing. But we don't get it's going out in person that gives us the opportunity to encounter people like that young woman that stood up and said that to me, which will stay with me the rest of my life and make me think, what does it mean to love in a Braveheart way? And what I've wanted to do, there's the really selfish component of, I want to be face to face and hear the voices of human people. I want to be with an audience. What a lot of people don't understand is the audience is as big a part of creating a story as the narrator is of telling the story. It's where the audience responds. It's when they're listening. It's when they're disengaging that gives you the guideposts of where the story is working, where it's powerful. But I want to tell people, men and women, they're not alone. Like, what is the kind of man that I want to be? And I want to be there in person with them to do that. I just got to be in Mississippi, and I did my show at the Mississippi College. And the Sunday before the show, I was able to go to the Anderson United Methodist Church, which is predominantly Black, the largest predominantly Black Methodist church in Mississippi, which is saying something. And their love for me was overwhelming, just their love for everyone. But I told them the story that is kind of the through line of my show, that a few years ago I was lying in a hospital, and my doctors came in and told me they were planning to amputate my right hand. I had an infection that was eating through my hand, and it wasn't my hand they were worried about. It was my life. They were afraid they would cut off my hand to save my arm. They'd cut off my arm to save my life. And they weren't sure they could do that. Wow. And the next morning, through some prayer and some miracles, my hand was still there. And I decided I was going to celebrate having hands, not just do exercises to regain the use of my hand. I was going to and I bought a piano. I started to write and play music again. And it's that journey that led me to them. And I sang Precious Lord, Take My Hand, which was Martin Luther King's favorite hymn.
Yeah, exactly.
And of course, I was weeping, and I thought, am I making a fool of myself? And I looked around and the choir was weeping. And that, you can't have that experience sitting isolated. You have to step out and engage with life. One of the soldiers that I met during the making of We Were Soldiers had a phrase. He said, "I've been where the metal meets the meat."
Yeah.
We have to be where the metal meets the meat.
Mm-hmm.
So therapeutic when you think about like opening up the floor to talk to, because people, all your stories. One thing I did notice about all your stories, I think there's a common thread that runs through all of them. Like it comes from a place deep inside, you, and I think it's therapeutic, even just hearing the stories of redemption. And would you say, I mean, if you thought about all your stories, do they come from, would you say there's one particular place? Would you say, I write stories for this reason?
Yes.
Or what would that reason be?
Well, I'm often asked why I write war stories, and I always say I don't. I write love stories. I want to know what you love enough to give your life for it, because it's not until you find that you are actually living. You're not alive until you found what you love enough to die for. And that to me has been and will, I know, always remain being a father. As a father, and of course, you can't be a father unless you find a woman you love enough to marry, to be with, to be committed to. So that's the way I see it. And gentlemen, I'm really sorry. I've got another one stacked up.
No, that's fine. Randall, I'm so glad that we had this time with you.
Come back and talk more with you. If I'd love to do this more.
I want to come to your live event. So you need to keep us on that email distribution list. And I'm going to wrap up with this. When you said what you would die for, it just dawned on me. I would die for other men. Mm-hmm. Like I really believe that Fathers for Fathers is a life calling. So thank you, Randall, for even putting that narrative at the end of this chat in our heads. So
Randall, such a pleasure. God bless you. And let's do it again. We'd love to do it again if you're into it.
Great. Oh, I absolutely am. We'll do it for sure.
Okay.
Thank you, Randall.
Guys,
God
bless.
God bless.
Take care.
Holding me, I'm sinking, Father, this world is just too